now recording, and now we are broadcasting. You're ready to go, Carla.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to tonight's virtual primary election forum featuring candidates for Legislative District 10. This forum is co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Whidbey Island and Snow Isle Libraries. You can find additional information about the League on our website at www.lwvwhidbey.org. You can find information about using the libraries during our Phase 3 reopening on Snow Isle's website, www.snowisle.org. Our thanks to Snow Isle for aiding in the publicity of these events, including the production of the eye-catching posters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages informed and active participation in government. The League works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. We endeavor to make democracy work by offering events like this, by registering voters, and much more. If you're interested in our work, join us. Go to our website and become a member today. The library's mission is to provide resources to the community for lifelong learning. Our partnership enables us to pool our resources to provide neutral and unbiased information to the public. During this time of COVID restrictions, Snow Isle would like you to know they're providing no contact pickup of physical materials at your local library and a wide variety of online resources, including programs, downloadable print, and audiobooks. You can visit their website at www.snowisle.org. My name is Carla Grau-Egerton. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, and I will be your moderator this evening. My fellow panelist, in addition to the candidates, is Joanne Rooms, timekeeper. Our local league president, Carol Pulliam, is our platform manager. Candidates will be introduced in alphabetical order. The format for this evening is standard Q&A. The questions have been selected in advance by our forum committee from those submitted to us by league members and the public. None of the questions have been disclosed to the candidates prior to the opening of this forum. The moderator will pose all the questions. Each candidate will have an opportunity to answer all questions. The order of the candidates in respect to questions has been determined in advance by the league organizers to ensure a random and fair sequence. The first responder to a question will have 90 seconds to answer. The remaining candidates will have 60 seconds to answer. The timer will signal when 50 seconds remain and when time is up. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. For further information about the candidates and to see their responses to a different set of questions, visit our State League's website at www.vote411.org. This forum is being recorded by the League. A link for viewing it will be posted on our website. No other recording is permitted. The League adheres strictly to the requirements of the FCC regarding use of recordings. Any use of the recording requires approval by the League of Women Voters Whidbey Island, and then with the caveat that it must be broadcast in its entirety. No candidate is allowed to edit or use the footage for campaign purposes. Before we begin the questions, our platform manager, Carol Pulliam, will explain the technical format. Carol?
Thank you, Carla. It has been my pleasure to support our program tonight. For those of you who have not attended a webinar before, I want to clarify what you will see and hear. You will be able to see the questions for the candidates and watch the candidates as they answer the questions. The contact information for all of the candidates will be posted during their closing statements. We hope that you will contact them with your questions. You will not be able to interact with us during the webinar, And to get feedback from you, you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to our League of Women Voters email. We hope you will help us learn from this experience so that we may do a better job in October for the general election forums. Thank you for joining us. Let's go, Carla.
Okay, well, here we go. We have going to the slide for question 1 for the candidates for state representative. And we're going to lead with Ivan Lewis. What is your plan to fund the shortfalls to employment security caused by the COVID-19 economic impacts and mass unemployment?
Hello. So when we talk about the shortfalls in any program, we rely so heavily on reactionary responses to state level funding. It is imperative that we strongly invest in our funding mechanisms rather than falling on austerity. This is one of those areas where we just aren't going to be able to backtrack and cut back spending. It's a guarantee that we're going to put out this investment. So this means that we have to look towards how do we shore up the short-term investment for funding, and how do we look towards long-term ways to safeguard against the shortfall, especially with the sheer volume associated with employment security. It isn't a program that we can allow to come up short. So we're going to have to look at new funding mechanisms. We're going to have to look at ways to support outside of its general self-funding mechanism of employer-issued rate adjustments, so that we can have a more robust and more secure environment moving forward.
Thank you. The question goes next to Suzanne Woodard. Suzanne, you need to unmute yourself, please.
That's helpful. Our 10th LD working families, our senior citizens, and our service sector are going to be hit very hard with this COVID recession, and this could go on for some time. And we can't sacrifice our commitment to services that support our community during these times of trouble. Small businesses and working families struggled before COVID with the tax burden in Washington state, and we can't look at them to pay any more to support our whole state revenue system. It is imperative that we correct our regressive tax structure, and it needs to be done very quickly. We have an opportunity now to open up new revenue options that include reversing tax carve-outs for corporations and taking a really hard look at capital gains and luxury taxes for those who can't afford to pay, and share the tax burden to correct this shortfall. We need recognitions that our Washington state families are profit creators for big businesses in our state, and they need support for these during these times as well, and we should provide it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The question goes next to Taylor Zimmerman. Unmute, please. There.
Hi. Yeah, so I completely agree. We need to end our regressive tax structure and make it, more of a progressive tax structure. The solution isn't going to be cutting any programs or funding, but generating more revenue. And we're going to have to get a little creative to do so. And I think one way that we can do that is to utilize municipality bonds and municipality currencies that will put more money into the hands of the people in the community. And that's where we need the money to be. We need the money in the communities, not with our governments, not with our federal government. Another way is for the state and local level to generate more money. To do so, we can utilize the municipal lending facility, and the Federal Reserve can purchase bonds from local and state municipalities. In that way, that will bring more money into state and local government, and then we can give money back into the community via bonds.
Thank you. The question goes next To Angie Hamola.
Thank you. Washington's tax code ranks 50th out of all the states in our nation for fairness. This state, it has multimillionaires who are paying less taxes than the people who make them rich and can't afford to buy diapers. And they pay less taxes than our small and local businesses. Our tax structure is not fair. I will support a capital gains and a wealth tax, but in the long run, these will still be not enough to fill the gap. Our state's Economic and Revenue Forecast Council predicts an $8.8 billion shortfall through 2023. Therefore, I would like to advocate an economic impact study to evaluate our existing tax structure and alternatives, one that engages the public and lets them help decide what will work best for them. This means not just increasing revenue, but also rooting out our inefficiencies and to look for better government spending, which is exactly what I did while serving as Island County Commissioner during the Great Recession, balancing the budget while still providing vital public services. Thank you.
Thank you. The question goes next to Dave Paul.
Hi, thank you, and sorry about that. First, I just want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and Snow Isle Libraries for hosting this event. It's really important that we have opportunities for civic engagement and civil dialogue. So I just want to say thank you first. So first, there's no silver bullet to deal with the revenue shortfall. We did learn from the Great Recession that draconian budget cuts will hurt the most vulnerable in our society, and that if we're not careful, if we cut too deeply, it will actually hurt the economic recovery. I've been calling for the governor to have a special session since May so that the legislature could have more targeted tax cuts rather than the across the board, targeted spending cuts rather than the across the board cuts we're seeing now. And I think that it'd be better to have a special session to deal with that at the legislative level than having this done by the governor.
Thank you. The question goes next to Scott McMullen. Scott, unmute yourself, please. There.
Hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that we cannot let these people slip through the cracks. We need to shore up the employment security. I also believe in things that are already mentioned as far as taxing, looking at capital gains. I think everything needs to be on the table. Maybe looking at a luxury tax. I do know that they're probably going to have to be cuts in addition to that. And we'll have to make the best decision on the importance of it at that time. But yes, 18% of the total taxes are paid by the lower and middle class, and with the wealthiest just paying 3%. So thank you.
Thank you. And the question goes next to Greg Gilday.
Thank you. In relation to the Employment and Security Department, I think the first thing that needs to happen is that the governor needs to ask Susie Levine to step down from that because she's shown a failure of leadership there. It is a guaranteed program, and we need to look at getting through the backlog of claims. However, this is not the time to raise taxes, as some of the other candidates have been talking about. Increasing in taxes is just stunt any resurgence in the economy and would incentivize businesses to leave the state of Washington. And right now, we need to encourage businesses to stay here and invest in our state and invest in our labor pool. And so, I would be against raising any of the taxes.
Thank you. We will now move to question number 2. What are your plans for communicating with all your constituents, regardless of party affiliation? The question goes first to Taylor Zimmerman. Taylor, you need to unmute yourself.
There it is. Yeah, thanks for the question. Yeah, so we're absolutely at a point, in our nation where I don't know if the divisiveness has ever been stronger between political affiliations and ideologies. I think first off, we need to understand that we're all on the same team. I think we all have a lot of the same goals and visions. It's just we have some different differing ideas of policies on how we want to get there. And so I think bringing everyone together and just talking about things first off, and not getting into heated debates, but laying things out there and finding out similar ground that we're all on, even more so than the different ground that we may think that we are. So I mean, I guess during the COVID time, I want to do a lot of virtual town halls. I would do a talk show, weekly talk show, hosting with my campaign team, and just talk about issues, open policy, open arms, want full collaboration with everybody. I do think that, any representative in this position shouldn't have all the answers. They should be working with all sides, and figuring out different perspectives. Once you find different perspectives in people, you can really establish a relationship and move forward in taking action and getting things done.
Thank you. The question goes next to Angie Homola.
Thank you. Well, I feel like my job as an elected official is to inform the electorate, to engage them. And I did that as a county commissioner. One of the first things I did was work with my colleagues to bring cameras into our commissioners' hearing room so that for the first time in county history, the public could actually engage in what was going on. We took our meetings to our public hearings out to community members that the issue affected, changed our assignments for committees that were open to the public such that they were advertised in the paper and they were properly vetted in the public. I will operate in the same method with an open door policy, working collaboratively as I did in the Legislative Steering Committee by bringing all parties together to go up and lobby on the Hill, which helped earn me a bipartisanship award. And I would love to come and have town hall meetings in our community and hopefully in public, but if necessary by Zoom, and to keep people informed via our newsletters and engage them and invite them to come and visit with us and engage and help visit, make decisions for what matters to them.
Thank you. The question goes next to Greg Gilday.
So I think the first thing that I'd like to say is that when I'm in Olympia, I'm going to have an open door policy that anybody can come in and talk with me and I will listen, regardless of party affiliation, because that's how you're going to come to some better ideas. If you can bring stakeholder groups together and discuss these ideas, you can get to a better end point. We may not agree on everything, but I will always listen. So it's, and then the other thing that I would encourage is for the legislature to expand on the remote testimony ability. There are a lot of people that would like to get involved in the legislation and legislative process, but don't have the ability to take a full day to drive down to Olympia to testify for their 2 minutes. And so I think if we can expand on the remote testimony and get more people involved in the legislative process, that's going to benefit everybody.
Thank you. The question goes next to Dave Paul.
Thank you, Carla. That's a great question. So I've said over and over again, the best part of being a state representative is having the opportunity to listen to constituents and try to advocate for their behalf. So I have worked very hard to meet with as many constituents as I can, regardless of their party affiliation. I've had some great and some also challenging conversations with folks from both parties in Olympia and back home. I'm one of the few legislators that's participated in bipartisan town halls, and with Representative Norma Smith and also Senator Mazzal this past session. I think that's really an important opportunity to have for folks to be able to see their representatives on the stage together answering questions. Also tried to work with videos to show constituents how they can better advocate for the issues that they're concerned about when they come down to Olympia, because that time is oftentimes so short. So those are just some of the ways I've tried to reach out.
Thank you. Question goes next to Ivan Lewis.
So I think that for me, the most important element of this is that we tend to get ourselves into the notion that who we caucus with in Olympia is who we represent. And it's just fundamentally inaccurate. We represent the constituents of our community. And whether or not that's a party that I affiliate with or another party, they are my neighbors, my friends, my family, my community. And I think that it's imperative that we recognize that first and foremost. Who we caucus with and how we legislate comes second to our relationship with our constituents, and that would be my fundamental building block for how I work with my community.
Thank you. The question goes next to Suzanne Woodard.
It would help if I unmuted myself again. So that is a great question. And I just want to say that I have been a registered nurse for over 30 years, and I have taken care of people all up and down the spectrum, and never one time did I wanted to inquire about their political affiliation. And somehow our country has gotten to a point where that seems to be the leading fact when you caucus with anybody, when you speak with anybody. And we need to get to a place where we can come and talk, and we've forgotten that you can disagree and you can have a fundamental difference of opinion, but you still have value, and we need to come to the table and have more dialogue and sit down and talk and come to a place where we can have a consensus. And that is missing, and that is what I want to bring to Olympia. I want to be able to sit down and talk with people, and I want to not just talk, I want to hear what they have to say. I want to hear their viewpoints and share what we have to work with. Thank you.
Thank you. And the question goes to Scott McMullen.
Okay, am I muted?
You're on.
Okay. I would reach out to all groups, regardless whether I agreed with them or not, as I did as when I had ward meetings, when I was a city council member. I stayed at those meetings, often way late, way over time, just to make sure that everybody was heard. I've also signed a pledge with a group called With Honor. It is for veterans that vow to reach across the aisle at least 2 times a year and to be civil. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that takes us to question number 3. In what ways do you think the state will be affected by climate change? And what should the state specifically be doing now to mitigate these effects? The question goes first to Dave Paul.
Thank you. That's a great question. Protecting our quality of life is one of the 3 main reasons I got into the race 2 years ago. And we already seen how Washington State is affected by climate change, from Eastern Washington and even in Western Washington with wildfires, to growing issues in the Salish Sea affecting shellfish farming and in our salmon runs and our orcas. I'm proud of the work that we did in the 2019, but also the 2020 legislative session to help address the harmful effects of climate change and to be national leaders in fighting climate change. I think the bill I'm most proud of is the 100% clean energy bill, because that bill not only gets our electrical grid to 100% clean energy in an aggressive fashion, but does so in a way that is not burdensome to utilities and to taxpayers. And when we do those things right, we will actually be saving folks money and creating family wage jobs here in districts like the 10th. So that bill, originally some of the folks that were opposed, we came up with some compromises, some pretty common sense compromises, and got that passed. Still work to do, especially in our transportation sector, but I'm excited to continue that work next section.
Thank you. The question goes next to Greg Gilday.
Thank you for that question. So as far as environmental regulation goes, I think the first thing we need to do is we need to adopt performance standards and review current programs. And then we need to use those to target programs that have measurable results. We can invest in projects that give us more bang for the buck. For example, the low carbon fuel standard can arguably reduce atmospheric carbon, but those carbon offsets can be purchased much cheaper from the Bonneville Power Administration, and we can get more bang for our buck there. We need to encourage the use of technology in our lives because people, they tend to conserve what they measure. And so if we're measuring how much pollution we're doing, then we can conserve and do less. The last thing is I would say is we need to allow cities to incentivize the building of higher density housing near transit corridors. This would allow us to leverage existing infrastructure, provide more housing for people to live closer to their jobs, cutting down on travel. These incentives could include better zoning, streamlining permitting process, and lowering the permit impact and infrastructure fees.
Thank you. The question goes next to Scott McMullen.
Unmute. There we go. Washington is a global leader in clean energy, but with many local businesses under threat by reduced international trade and a struggling U.S. economy, we should prioritize incentives to buy clean energy products manufactured in Washington state. Our state also benefits from ecotourism, and the 10th LD in particular has some of the most scenic recreational opportunities anywhere. By preserving our forests and open spaces, keeping our rivers and Puget Sound clean, and protecting our resident orca pods, we can ensure the vibrancy of our economy and our environment for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. You might want to, there you are. We lost your video for a moment, but you're back.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
The question goes next to Ivan Lewis.
Well, in regards to effect, the effects, besides the effects to the 10th legislative district and our coastlines, besides the Salish Sea, besides the effects to First Peoples rights and treaty rights, besides all of those kind of immediate effects, we have the long-term effects of the survival of our kids and our kids' kids. The reality is that there is a crisis brewing that needs to be addressed head on. And the solution, what the state should be doing, is taking an opportunity to implement a New Deal, to take a Washington New Deal approach, a Green New Deal, to mix two of our current most pressing needs. We should be investing in a green economy while putting people to work and shifting the burden that we've put on our economy being so carbon heavy to being the future of sustainability and the future of an investment in our and not just today, but tomorrow.
Thank you. The question goes next to Angie Homola.
Well, Washington state is expected to be a climate refugee state, and as snowpack is lessening, we will have big impacts to our dams, which will affect our hydropower, our ability to provide for our agriculture industries, and we're also expecting to have some impacts along our coastal areas. Planning for climate change is vitally important. We absolutely have no choice. Washington's Energy Independence Act of 2007 requires our state utilities to get a 15% of their electricity from renewable sources by 2020, and future reductions in emissions will be driven up by 2020 with the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which will require our utilities to stop using coal by 2025 and be greenhouse gas neutral by 2030. And we'll also need to be not emitting any fossil fuel emissions by 2045. And I support all of those measures. I would also urge the social cost of carbon be considered in our contracts.
Thank you. Question goes next to Taylor Zimmerman.
Yeah, this is a big question. I agree with Dave Paul. The effects are already here. We're already seeing it. Seattle's near sea level. And I also agree with Ivan Lewis a lot. I'm a big supporter of the Green New Deal. I think we need to bring that here. This is probably the single biggest issue humanity is facing at the moment. And we need to do everything we can to mitigate it in our state. As far as emissions, carbon emissions, we need to go carbon neutral. We can do that by further restrictions to the cars. I'd say lifting the moratorium, we're discussing doing that with next gen nuclear energy as well. That's come a long way. And it's actually a safe form of energy. Hydrogen fuel cell energy for long range trucking for our transportation industry. Let's enhance mass transit. Let's open up bike lanes. Let's utilize electric bikes. And let's keep on doing the work from home. I mean, that's going to save a lot of traffic in Seattle. You saw it already when people were working from home. That will be huge.
Thank you. And the question goes last to Suzanne Woodard.
Hi, yes. Well, during this pandemic, we need to look at this as an opportunity for everyone to take a pause, to pivot and change directions as a community. And we need to move in a greener direction in almost every avenue of our LD in our state. We are clearly running out of time to address global warming and climate change. And in the good work that was started by some of our conservation leaders needs to be supported and enhanced. We cannot put this in the parking lot and wait until we deal with the pandemic fallout. We have to continue the work that's going on. And I will stand up and support and be a champion for bold solutions to lead our states towards this correction. We have great programs in our community and we need to support them, and we need to think outside the box and move in a forward direction to keep the momentum going so we can save our community and save our economy as well, and save our wildlife. We are all one big ecosystem. We have to work together.
Thank you. And we go now to question number 4. Given the current need to prepare our classrooms to meet COVID-19 safety guidelines, how can the state support school districts to alleviate the financial burdens they will incur? The question goes first to Angie Homola.
Well, education is our state's paramount duty, and we almost accomplished what we had to under the McCleary decision. We were just about there when we were struck by this pandemic. So for the immediate future, COVID has presented a rapid and unprecedented need to overhaul our delivery system of education. And our state is going to need to help pay for that because it's going to cost extra money. I had the opportunity to speak with the principal and some school board members and teachers in 2 of our districts, and I recognize what a great job they've been doing for outreach with our communities and parents, and the will of those parents is that we return our kids to school. That's the major will. We need to do it thoughtfully and carefully. And one of the most important things we can do to help pay for that is I think we're going to have to increase impact fees that we're getting from the military. I would like to be able to restore our ability for junior taxing districts to be able to follow the inflationary rate, which would be undoing Tim Iman's initiative back some 17 years ago. Our children are the most affected by this, and those who have the least or have struggling home environments don't do well at home. So we really want to be able to find a way for them to learn in the school, and we need to offer flexibility to our school districts, which they have been, we've been able to do at the state level, so that teachers and administrators can work within the constraints they have, staggering the start and stop times and so forth. But it's going to take some money to really help fill in all the needs they're going to have to do to provide those protocols.
Thank you. The question goes next to Scott McMullen. Scott, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, there we go.
And then you can get some video.
Oh, video goes off. I don't know how that goes off. Okay.
There.
The safety of our students and the teachers and staff are of utmost importance. And I have 3 teenagers at home, and believe me, I want them to go back to school. They want to go back to school. It's we need to make sure we do it safely and smartly. By some of the things Angie mentioned and the start and stop times, I agree with. As far as the financial burdens, I think that we have to make this a priority, and hopefully it can come from some of the tax revenues that we look at to finance this as well.
15.
Thank you. That's all I have. Yeah.
Thank you. Question goes next to Suzanne Woodard.
Hi. So I am always going to err on the side of public safety. First off, I'm going to say my husband is a South Woodbury School District employee. And until our schools can be open without the threat of viral transmission to other students, to other educators, janitorial staff, and bus drivers, we need to put the brakes on opening school until we can make sure that our community is going to be safe. We are going to be in a situation where we have to deal with this coronavirus for quite some time. It is not going to be over with soon. And we are going to have, as a way of life, we are going to continue social distancing. We are going to have to wear masks in public. And we are going to have people stay at home. And that's our only method of dealing with this. I firmly believe children need an education, but I also believe that they need to be safe. And the threat of this virus being spread in this community is huge. And we do not want to start something and then have to reel it back. So the space requirements in most of our schools that we have, some have them and some don't. We need to work on that and have a firm plan in place to protect our community from moving forward before we bring our children into the mix.
Thank you. The question goes next to Greg Gilday.
So education is the paramount duty of the state, and we need to get this one right. This one hits near and dear to me because my wife teaches second grade in Mount Vernon, and I have 2 boys in the public school system here in the San Camino district. I'm in agreement with the American Academy of Pediatrics that came out with a study that says that the policy considerations really need to start with the goal of having in-person school. In-person school is fundamental to a child's development and well-being, and we need to focus then on the risk mitigation strategies, social distancing, mask wearing if it's going to be feasible, and look at things such as staggered start times or more of a cohort model instead of having the kids go to different classes. If remote learning is mandated or necessary, we need to have it so that it's required to meet online learning standards. Distance learning, as they like to term it now, doesn't have any statutory guidelines. So schools were able to get away with doing very little and our kids are falling behind. And so we're the most technologically advanced state. We should be able to solve the problem of getting kids online. And we need to set standards for the curriculum so that they don't fall further behind.
Thank you. The question goes next to Dave Paul.
So thank you. So I think, it's incredibly important that we get this right in terms of making sure that our students and our teachers and our staff can return to school safely. So the question really is about financing, and so I'm going to focus on that here for a minute. That our school districts are worried more about cuts from the state than they are about needing additional dollars right now. As I've talked to, I think now just about every district in our district. They're worried about cuts. I think the way to address the expanded costs that they may be incurring because of COVID is to focus on the federal dollars that are coming in from the stimulus. The 2 packages have already happened, and the third that we're hopeful is going to happen, and make sure that those go to the districts that need it the most through the levy equalization, but helping students first. With connectivity and then districts next.
Thank you. Question goes next to Ivan Lewis.
There's a lot of costs to unpack in how this goes. We have the issues of access to broadband if we're going to be doing virtual. How do we gain access to that? We have the increased costs of safety regulations and precautions to make sure that everyone is doing this in a safe and effective way. And we have the increased costs of how do we handle materials and transport. All of those things come back to an immediate issue, but we also have this broader investment issue when we talk about education. Education has a wonderful return on investment, and it should be something that we broadly invest in. And this brings into a scenario where it's not just K through 12. We also have support services that we're going to need to be able to fund. We need to make sure that we have enough mental health professionals, enough support staff. We need to be looking at child care and pre-K, and we need to look at career readiness. And those are things we need to be investing in, and we should do that as a broad package, not just filling the stopgap of shortfalls, but also looking at how do we really invest in cradle to career education moving forward.
Thank you. The question goes lastly to Taylor Zimmerman.
Thank you. Yeah, public safety and public health is absolutely number one during these times. I mean, first off, I do anticipate that there will be a second wave. You can't expect a second grader to keep their mask on all day. And so I do anticipate, a virtual learning environment going forward this fall. We're gonna need to help teachers adapt to that. And one way we can do that is to create jobs with IT jobs, IT folks to come in there and assist with those virtual learning environments. Another thing we need to consider is rural broadband. How are rural folks going to get access to these virtual learning environments? Another thing is childcare. Usually school is relied upon for childcare while a parent is at work. So how are we going to fund this? We need to hold our federal government accountable. We're a sovereign nation that prints its own currency. We're not restrained by budgetary constraints. Give us the money that we need for education and infrastructure.
Thank you. With that concludes our question period, and we are going to reserve closing statements until after the candidates for the state Senate positions have answered the questions. And then we will return to closing statements for all. So thank you, candidates for state representative positions 1 and 2. We will move on now to the candidates for the state Senate. And with that, we are going to start with question number 1. How will you prioritize programs and services jeopardized by declining state revenue? The question goes to Helen Price Johnson.
Thank you to the League and Snow Owl for hosting us this evening. This is such an important part of the election process. I'm very grateful that we were able to be included tonight. This is going to be a top priority for the for the incoming session. I had hoped that there would be a special session to help alleviate the cuts that will be needed, but there's really two phases of this. As we are in the pandemic, we really have to prioritize that response. We have to make sure that we have the public health and the mental health programs in place to get our communities through this. We need to make sure that we're not making decisions that are going to impact the economics of our communities as well. And so, we're just barely hanging on as we get through this pandemic, and we need to make sure that those decisions go through that lens. So that's how I would prioritize those services.
Thank you. The question goes now to Ron Mazzal.
Good evening. Well, this is an interesting process that we're going through at this time, and certainly we had hoped that we would have a special session to be able to address this. We had $1 billion in extra spending that was going into effect after July 1, and to be able to stop some of that would have helped, at least in the short term. About 65% of our budget is beyond our control. McCleary decision and other things bring those, that, whether it's education or other things, we really don't have the ability to cut back on that spending. The next high priority is our most vulnerable population. We passed some really good legislation this last year when it came to new mother care and so on. We would look to avoid that. but we're going to have to look at some cutting when it comes to, for instance, the studies by the legislature and that.
Thank you. We go now to question number 2. Political divisiveness in our country and state has rendered much legislative work very difficult. How would you promote cooperation and productivity in the legislature? And we'll start with Ron Mazzal.
Well, that's an extremely good question and one that I have fought against. I think dialogue is the first step. Having open dialogue on all subjects is extremely important. I worked across the aisle in my first legislative session, and I didn't find it that difficult. Going forward, my office is always open to everyone. We may not always agree, but we can always agree to disagree on things, and having good dialogue is a portion of that. Working in committee with the other side is extremely important in finding out the facts and being able to work toward the solutions to those. Thank you.
Thank you. Now to Helen Price Johnson.
Well, the issues that we're facing are so complex. We can't afford to get into partisan bickering, and I really have found that at the work at the county commissioner level. I've been in the minority most of the time. I've been a county commissioner, and as long as we are focused on the people that we're serving and the communities that have elected us, we can get a lot done moving forward together. In my work with the Washington State Association of Counties, I've been able to identify those issues that we have in common across the state at the local government level and be able to build coalitions to create change. Whether it's rural and urban, whether it's Republican and Democrat or independent, if we focus on those issues where we can find common ground, and we treat each other with respect and civility while we're addressing the issues and not getting into political attacks, we can get a long way together.
Thank you. We go now to question number 3. Education and transportation are chronically underfunded in the state. What specific proposals would you support to rectify this situation? The question goes first to Ron Mazzal. Oh, you need to unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you very much. There are a lot of ideas out there toward funding both education and transportation. Part of them I have real issues with, including car transponders and that sort of thing. I think we've done a decent job of funding education. Prioritizing that may be part of the issue there. We've pumped a tremendous amount of money into our state educational system since the McCleary decision. Unfortunately, we haven't seen some of the returns we'd hoped for. Transportation, we're not going to build ourselves out of the problem that we have with transportation, especially in the Seattle metro area. There isn't the room and so on. And so far, some of the alternatives have proven to be horribly expensive. I'm not sure what all the answers are there. I think that we have to take a real hard look at what this pandemic has brought to us in the way of commuting electronically like we've done, and maybe there's a lot more answer there than we had ever thought. Also goes the same in education. I think that all of this is for conversation going forward, and we certainly are going to be struggling with a budget addressing both of those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question goes next to Helen Price Johnson.
Well, these are really very important issues for Washington State, and not a new topic, to tell you the truth, but with transportation in particular, we are so dependent on gas tax in this state for funding basic maintenance of our road system, and gas tax is going down, partly because people aren't traveling as much, but also because cars go further on a tank of gas, and some of them don't use gas at all. So there's some fundamental changes that need to take place in funding our transportation system. And certainly around education, it comes from our state general fund, which it has, as was noted, it is a terribly regressive tax system. I'm really excited to watch, and have been watching the bipartisan work of Representative Noel Frame and Senator Wagner in their review of the state tax structure. And I'm very hopeful that they'll come forward with some bipartisan proposals that can be implemented to help address this issue.
Thank you. Question number 4. Given the perennial shortfall in state revenues, how would you finance the much needed upgrades for the state's infrastructure? The question goes to Helen Price Johnson.
Well, I think this is a really timely question, because with the COVID pandemic, trying to make sure that we are using the revenues that we have really wisely and keeping people working, making an investment in infrastructure is a really good way to do this. And particularly around infrastructure that we know is meeting some of the basic needs that we have across our community, both in reacting to climate change, but also the state's mandate, the court case that mandates increasing the salmon rivers and improving the culverts across our state. So I think by using some of our one-time funding that is coming through the COVID outbreak, monies from the federal government, as well as some of our rainy day fund, this would be a really smart way to help generate sales tax in construction projects, as well as get some of the much needed infrastructure projects completed.
Thank you. The question goes now to Ron Mazzal.
Well, in a time of economic downturn, it's always good for the government to invest in infrastructure. We have some of those funds which come out of the federal to help with that. But honestly, unless we have a legislative session to address the shortfall that we're having, our rainy day fund is going to be gone, as well as our ESD trust fund. We're not going to have any money in the bank. So it is going to be incredibly difficult for us to come up with money to invest in infrastructure. We can look at more revenue, but of course that has an impact on where that revenue comes from. And our business community and what was once a prospering economy is going to be more stressed as we return, and it's going to become more increasingly difficult to find that tax dollar. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the question portion of this evening's event. And we are now going to move to closing statements. And what we're going to do is take the closing statements from the candidates for state representative positions 1 and 2, and we are going to go in alphabetical order. So the first candidate will be Greg Gilday.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to the League of Women Voters of Whidbey Island and to the Snow Isle Libraries, the other candidates, and for everyone listening tonight. I've actually really enjoyed this. So the COVID shutdown is going to have far-reaching effects. It's going to take years to resolve. The upcoming session is going to be unlike any session before, with difficult discussions surrounding the budget, taxes, and services. And I believe my background and leadership ability makes me the best candidate for this position. And we're also going to need to talk about other things outside of COVID. And so when I'm in Olympia, I'm going to fight to strengthen our K-12 education as well as our skilled trade pathways. This is going to include doing what is necessary to provide in-person instruction, or at a minimum have a robust online curriculum and not simply just distance learning. The second thing I will fight for is I'm going to fight for solutions to the drug, homelessness, and housing issues. These are largely intertwined and can be partly addressed by investing in our mental health system, which has been underfunded, and in order to provide help to those people in need. It also be partly addressed by increasing affordable housing, and the way we can do that is to make it affordable to actually build housing. I will also fight efforts to raise taxes. We don't have a revenue problem here in the state of Washington. We have a spending problem. I'm the only candidate in my race that is not going to rely on tax increases to address our mounting budget crisis. And the last thing I'll say tonight is that I'm going to work across the aisle and listen to all parties. I'm going to have that open door policy. You know, I've spoken with a lot of voters over the past couple of months, and one question that I often get is, do you think you can work with Democrats? And I only half jokingly tell them, you know, I've been married to one for the last 20 years, so I've had lots and lots of practice. So yes, I think I can talk to them. To learn more, you can visit greggilday.com. And again, my name is Greg Gilday. I'm running for the State House of Representatives for the 10th Legislative District, Position 1, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. The next person for closing statements is Angie Homola.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm running for this position because my conscience compels me to do everything I can in my power to care for future generations and to defend the rights imperiled by modern politics, democracy, freedom from oppression, and the pursuit of happiness. Oak Harbor has been my family's home for 23 years, where our children attended public schools, and my husband served our country as a naval aviator. I volunteered in our communities for over 2 decades, teaching enrichment courses and helping pass a levy that brought hot lunches to hungry school kids, earning the endorsement of the Washington Education Association. As an architect and former carpenter, laborer, and machinist, I have a deep appreciation for vocational schooling. And to help preserve natural resources and find a path forward for renewable energy, I founded an environmental nonprofit and obtained a master's in environmental law and policy, earning the Sierra Club's endorsement. My interest in elected office was sparked 17 years ago when, as a whistleblower, I exposed an elected official's abuse of office. 5 years later, while working on a grant application, I discovered a blatant abuse of $500,000 public tax dollars by that same official. I began attending city and county meetings where citizens' interests took a backseat to special interests. So I ran for county commissioner and took office at the onset of the Great Recession and began an era of respectful and equal representation. I have governed successfully and responsibly during hard times by working collaboratively with my peers to steer a struggling county forward while increasing transparency, meeting mandates, and protecting and improving vital public services and environmental protections. I'm ready and able to do the same at the state level. I will offer a wealth of experience, accountability, and compassion to represent effectively the remarkable people and the beautiful places they love in our district. I'm Angie Homola, candidate for State House, Position 1 in the 10th LD. Please visit my website, angieforall.com. I respectfully ask for your vote and your help. Thank you for being engaged voters.
Thank you. And Ivan Lewis.
Well, thank you so much to the League and to Snow Isle Libraries and other candidates. This has been a blast. I have 4 very young kids. My oldest is 7. My youngest is 2. I am acutely aware that their future depends on the actions we take today. And let's be clear, we've been in trouble for a little while, long before COVID came around, and long before the social unrest second to the murder of George Floyd. We were struggling to get this right, and we need right now real people in Olympia, people who understand what it's like to raise kids today in today's economy, and to not have the protections of a employer-sponsored pension, and not have the protections of employee-sponsored health insurance, to wonder whether or not they're going to be able to pay for their kids' education. We need real folks in Olympia. I want to go to Olympia not just to add to the Democratic majority, but to be a real champion for the working class, the working poor, and those being left behind. A champion for Washington's single-payer healthcare system, like that proposed by Representative Appleton, the Health Security Trust. To be a real champion for cradle-to-career education system with expansions to ECAP and expansions to true career readiness. And to be a real champion for a Green New Deal in Washington that puts people to work, builds our infrastructure, invests in our future, and ensures that we have something for our children to inherit. And for those reasons, among others, is why I have the sole endorsement of the largest Island County Employees Union, AFSCME Local 1845, the sole endorsement of the Washington State Progressive Party, the sole endorsement of Sitting Commissioner Janet Sinclair. I intend to be a champion, and I ask that when you cast your ballot for Ivan Lewis as a champion for the working class, the working poor, and those being left behind. And I thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Next, it's Scott McMullen.
Alrighty. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for this opportunity tonight, and also the other candidates for a great discussion. My family and I live in Mount Vernon. I'm a firefighter EMT, and I served 26 years in the Air Force. I was elected and re-elected to the Mount Vernon City Council. I'm running because I love this community, and I want to put my experience to work tackling issues such as public safety and health, education, healthcare, and family wage jobs. As a firefighter EMT, I know firsthand what it will take to protect our first responders and frontline healthcare workers. I thought of running for state representative 16 years ago and spoke to a few people about it. Then there was a great state senator by the name of Harriet Spinell, unfortunately, late Harriet Spinell, that sat me down and said, Scott, you need to run for something like city council to learn the ins and outs of local government. At the time, I was a bit disappointed with the advice, being how eager I was to serve the state level. Nonetheless, I took her advice as I had great respect for her. I did not fully understand at the time why she encouraged me to go on this path, but I do now. I believe serving on the City Council, the Skagit Transit Authority Board, the Transportation Improvement Board, the Skagit Council of Governments, and the Skagit County Community Action Agency Board during the last recession are going to be invaluable in Olympia. Now more than ever, I think it's vital to elect someone with experience balancing budgets that has formed the needed relationships and record of getting things done. As your state representative, I'm ready to keep our community safe and get our economy back on track. I am asking that you give me that opportunity by voting for me. And if I got any more time, I also think that it's important to have reached out to different groups, as I have in marching with the Farm Workers March and Social Justice Marches recently. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dave Paul.
Hi, folks. And thank you to the League of Women Voters and Snow Owl Library again for hosting us and the candidates. Hi, everybody who's watching. It's a beautiful night. I know there are other things you could be doing with your time. I'm Representative Dave Paul, and it's an honor to serve you in the state legislature. I've met many of you either 2 years ago when I was campaigning or over the last 2 years as your representative. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm a parent and an educator and a husband. My family and I live in Oak Harbor, and I've worked for the last 12 years at Skagit Valley College. When I ran 2 years ago, I ran to make sure that all residents in our district would be represented in Olympia. And I've worked very hard to listen to constituents and then advocate for their concerns. And I hope that voters can trust that I'll do just that if I'm elected to a second term. Almost all the legislation I've worked on has come from constituents. It's their ideas, and my job is to help form that into public policy. So work I've done with veterans on improving dual credit programs like Running Start in college and high school have come from constituents. I'm fortunate enough to get to work with our K-12 partners in my role at the college, and then also in the legislature as vice chair of the education committee. And I think that's important to have an educator on that committee who understands hybrid online instruction, especially in the age of COVID. And I think it's important to have people who value healthcare and public health and will champion that and fight for our rural healthcare providers, which is what I did in the last legislative session. We need leaders that are going to invest in our communities, in our public health, in our environment. And this is a moderate district that expects folks to work across party lines and to put partisanship aside to get the work of the people done. And I think I've demonstrated that over the last 2 years. And I hope I can earn your vote for a second term. Again, I'm Dave Paul, and thank you so much for coming this evening.
Thank you. Next is Suzanne Woodard.
Okay, well, I want to again reiterate to the League of Women Voters in Snow Isle, so thank you so much for this candidates forum. The discussions have been very informative and very lively, and it's been a good opportunity for our community to get together and share our thoughts. Today, we have an opportunity to make some sweeping changes for the betterment of our district to benefit our working families, our seniors, and our military members, and our marginalized populations that are right here in this community. As a registered nurse, I believe healthcare is a human right of all people, not just some of the people. And this is the #1 topic that I get asked when I'm out phone banking or I'm out campaigning or Zooming, is healthcare related issues in our community. And I am vested in working on this. And I have received some pushback that I'm only a one issue candidate. And to this I respond, I will not hide my knowledge. I will continue to work on healthcare proudly until every single person in our community has great healthcare and healthcare access, and it isn't an issue any longer. You have an opportunity now to send a nurse to Olympia to represent you and help in the battle to benefit our neighbors. We have one nurse in the Washington State Legislature in either party right now, or either chamber, and she needs some help, and I want to go help her. I am a longtime labor advocate and a union leader. I have a proven track record of being able to work with opposition members, working across the aisle and achieving results. My negotiating and union collaboration background reflects in my leadership skills, and these skills are current. I was just last in Olympia in a leadership capacity in February of 2020. And this wasn't something I did 8 or 12 years ago. I'm very proud that I've been able to build and move my campaign forward, forming a broad spectrum coalition of supporters. I have been endorsed, my candidacy has been endorsed by 20 Republicans, and I'm the only House candidate to have a sole endorsement from the Washington State Labor Council. I'm Suzanne Woodard for Healthy Change. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Taylor Zimmerman.
Saving the best for last. You know, when you hear alphabetical order and your last name starts with a Z, you kind of assume you're going to be going last. So thanks again for the opportunity to be here. It's no big secret that we, the bottom 90%, have been losing the game of politics for a long time. Most of us have either become polarized or we've given up altogether. As hopeless as this may feel, it doesn't have to continue. We can change course. We can take our democracy back from the political machine that has perfected the art of capitalizing on corruption, inequality, divisiveness, empty promises, and gridlock. This fear-driven lesser of two evils political machine works extremely well for the elites at the expense of good people like you. We can't dig ourselves out of a hole with the same shovel that dug that hole in the first place. Our future challenges us to have the courage and creativity to innovate and reimagine politics to value long-term human needs over short-term corporate greed. My sincerest thanks to everyone who is listening. You're taking the time to honor us with your attention to local politics. It's something that you should be proud of, no matter who you choose to vote for. For those of you feeling ignored, for those of you feeling left behind, for those of you that refuse to bend an apathetic knee to the elitist political machine, I am here to welcome you to join with others who have the courage to work towards something new, something different, something better. For those of you that think housing, preserved natural spaces, education, healthcare, childcare should be inalienable human rights, I welcome you to take the next step by visiting us at taylorforprogress.com. And you can also join our Facebook group, which is also Taylor for Progress. Again, taylorforprogress.com. I'm Taylor Zimmerman, and I will be a champion for you in State Rep Position 2.
Thank you. Now we will hear closing statements from the candidates for State Senate. And we'll start with Helen Price Johnson.
Well, thank you so much, Carla, for your moderation tonight. And Joanne, you've done a phenomenal job. And I am really grateful for this opportunity to speak with all of you who have taken time out of your busy days to get informed about the choices that you'll be making. The primary election is August 4th, and you need to be sure and mark your ballots and get them in a timely manner. It's been a heartbreak of mine as a county commissioner serving in the elections review process to have to turn away ballots that had a late postmark. So if you're going to use the mail, I want to make sure people get their ballots in. I am Helen Price Johnson. I'm a candidate for the State Senate in the 10th Legislative District, and I've been a very proud member of the Board of Island County Commissioners since 2008, when I had the unique distinction of being the first woman ever elected to that seat. I have made a priority of addressing affordable housing, preservation of natural resources, improving the technology of the county and the access to services through our virtual environment, which has served us really well in the COVID outbreak. We really need to have a senator who's also looking out for us in that way, and I'll use my leadership and experience that I have gained in 30 years of serving this community to bring those skills to the Olympia. I want to make sure that we have access to healthcare, we have climate resiliency, we have support for our students at all levels. Our rural communities need really practical solutions. We need to be sure we're listening to the people who are implementing those policies that are made in Olympia, and that they have the resources that they need to get the job done. And we need to do so with a renewed commitment to equity. I think we are in a moment in time with the killing of George Floyd and the overall awareness of racial inequities that we need to grab this moment and make sure that we make substantial progress in addressing the systemic inequities across our state and across our country. But first and foremost, we have to keep our community safe. We have to make sure that our public health services are there to do the tracing and tracking that needs to be done to get a hold of this pandemic. We need to make sure that our healthcare workers are being protected, that we have adequate testing supplies so that we can respond as the waves of this pandemic move through our communities. And I urge us all to please wash your hands, please wear a mask, please watch your distance with each other and avoid big gatherings. It is the only way we're going to get through this and keep all our loved ones alive in the process. So thank you again for this opportunity to be with you tonight. And I wish you all the best, and I would ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And now for Ron Mazzal.
Good evening again. I am the fourth generation on our family farm. The fifth generation is vested, and the sixth generation is growing up on the farm. My concern for the future is the quality of life and the ability to continue on the manner in which we have grown up in the LD10. I will bring a pragmatic and practical approach to problem solving. I will bring accountability to Olympia. After 35 years of Democratic governorship in Washington State, we have a real lack of accountability when it comes to those departments that report to the governor. I have audit experience, and I'm also a strong advocate of not allowing unfunded mandates. I've had 30 plus years of business experience. I've served on the boards of Fortune 200 companies, the largest private employer in Skagit County, as well as church, county committees, ag co-op, North Whitby Fire and Rescue. I have proven a long-term ability to work with opposing views and come to a common solution. I've had the ability to travel across the country and across the world to see where answers can be found. My biggest commitment, though, is to solving our mental health and substance abuse crisis. I have faith that we can solve this cooperatively, and I ask you for your vote. I humbly ask to help me change Olympia to something that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes our questions and candidates' closing statements for this evening. Thank you all for attending this event. As chair of our forum committee, I want to thank the members of the committee for all their contributions to make these virtual events possible. And a huge thank you to our league president and platform manager, Carol Pulliam, for teaching the rest of us how to navigate this technology. It's been an unforgettable experience. We hope to see all of you again in the fall when we hold virtual candidates forums for the general election. Have a great evening.